Number 20. The studio did not want Brando. There was no way that anyone could have known that Marlon Brando would become the face of The Godfather. Paramount Pictures, the company, really didn't want him at all. Why? People said that Brando was hard to work with because he was unstable and often showed up late to the set. But Francis Ford Coppola, the director, had a dream. Brando would play the mysterious and strong Don Vito Corleone. Coppola had to fight the company hard to get them to put Brando in a movie. The company agreed, but Brando had to follow some strict rules. He had to work for free, audition like any other actor, and put up a $1 million bond to make sure he wouldn't cause any trouble. In the end, though, Brando's act was so good that everyone was stunned. The studio was wrong, and he played one of the most famous parts in movie history. This made The Godfather the masterpiece it is today. Number 19. You'll never guess who the highest-paid actor was. Brando was battling to get the part, but behind the scenes, there was another surprise. There wasn't a single actor like Brando, Pacino, or even Khan who made the most money out of the whole group. Richard Castellano played Peter Clemenza, who was loyal to the Corleone family and did their dirty work. Castellano was nominated for several awards for his role in Lovers and Other Strangers, which made him famous at the time. The set paid him the most because of his fame and image, making him more than bigger stars like Brando. However, Castellano's time with The Godfather did not last long. His pay requests for The Godfather 2 were too high, so the role of Clemenza had to be filled by someone else. Because the character was played by a different actor in the sequel, this choice changed the course of the series. Fans are still wondering how Castellano would have fit into the next part of the story. Number 18. Al Pacino was not the first choice for his role. Now, let's talk about Michael Corleone, who plays one of the most important parts in the whole movie. You might think that Al Pacino, who became famous, would be the best person for the part. But you won't believe it, the studio bosses didn't like him at all. He wasn't a big star at the time. His only part was a small one in The Panic in Needle Park. That person would have been a bigger star, like Warren Beatty, Robert Redford, or even Jack Nicholson. Coppola was set on getting Pacino, though, because he was sure that he was the only actor who could bring Michael Corleone to life. The battle wasn't easy. The company actually tried to fire Pacino 3 times while the movie was being filmed because they didn't like his performance. Paisano proved them all wrong, but Coppola stood his ground. His role as Michael Corleone is now seen as one of the best in movie history, solidifying his reputation as one of Hollywood's best actors. That's all there is to it. We saw how problems behind the scenes changed the movie's cast. But wait, making the movie wasn't all fun and games. Number 17. Brando used cue cards. Did you know that a lot of what Marlon Brando did as Don Vito Corleone was read from cue cards? It was well known that Brando could do anything on stage, but in The Godfather, he took it to a whole new level. Brando, who was one of the most famous stars in Hollywood, often used cue cards to remember what to say. Even though it seems strange for such a famous performance, it was because of the writing. The story was changed a lot at the last minute by the filmmakers. A lot of the time, these changes were made right before scenes were filmed, so players didn't have time to learn their lines. With his years of knowledge and unique style, Brando turned this challenge into a chance. He didn't try to remember the lines. He read them from cards, which worked great for his role. But this caused some trouble because his habit of using cue cards made it seem like he was hard to work with. You can't tell he was reading when you watch him act, though. He spoke clearly and drew people in, and in the end, they believed everything he said. Brando's cue cards didn't really change how real the movie was. The fact that he could turn words into something much deeper made his performance one of the best in movie history. Number 16. The film almost didn't get made. There were some problems with making The Godfather right from the start. Paramount Pictures didn't really believe in the idea at all. People thought the movie was too dangerous, too big, and too expensive. With a small budget of $2.5 million to start, director Coppola and the company were always fighting. Coppola, on the other hand, had an idea that he wouldn't give up on. When he wanted to tell the story of the Corleone family, he knew he needed to go back in time and have a big budget for the movie. The studio didn't see things the way he did. Their plan was to set the movie in the present day, which would have saved money but made it less real. They also had problems with the pacing, the acting, and even the idea of filming mob scenes in real places. After Coppola fought hard to get more money, the company finally gave in, but only reluctantly. After all was said and done, the movie cost about $6 million, which was a lot more than what was first planned. But this is where the magic happened. The Godfather became a worldwide hit. It made more than $245 million around the world, which made it the most successful movie of 1972. Without Coppola's hard work, this gem might not have been made, and Hollywood would have missed out on one of its finest moments. Number 15. The infamous opening scene was almost cut. At the beginning of The Godfather, when Bonacera begs Don Vito Corleone for justice, it is one of the most powerful scenes. Did you know that this famous scene almost didn't make it into the movie? Some people in charge of the studio thought the scene moved too slowly and didn't go with the rest of the movie. They wanted to cut it out completely, but Coppola wouldn't let that happen. He thought this scene set the tone for the whole movie because it showed how powerful, respected, and in charge Don Vito Corleone was. It was his right to fight hard to keep it, and he did. There is no better way to introduce Don Vito than in this scene. It also sets the tone for the ideas of justice, loyalty, and power that will run through the whole movie. In the end, that opening scene became one of the most famous and talked about moments in movie history, making The Godfather a classic for all time. Chapter 7. Frank Sinatra tried to get the film stopped. Number 14. Frank Sinatra tried to get the film stopped. There was still a lot going on behind the scenes of The Godfather. Here comes the famous singer Frank Sinatra, who wasn't too happy with how he was presented in the movie. Many people thought that the character of Johnny Fontaine, a famous singer who asks Don Vito Corleone for help, was a slightly veiled reference to Sinatra's own career. The plot drew comparisons between Fontaine's rise to fame and Sinatra's supposed ties to the mafia, which helped him get parts in Hollywood movies. Sinatra was angry about what he saw as an insult. He didn't like being portrayed as someone who used mafia connections to help his success. Because of this, Sinatra is said to have tried more than once to stop the making of The Godfather. Reports say that his team put pressure on the directors and even tried to scare them by threatening to sue them. But Sinatra's attempts were met with opposition from the mafia, who didn't expect it. With their own connections, they made sure that Sinatra's efforts to ruin the movie didn't work. It was clear that the movie would happen, even though Sinatra was against it, because of the strong forces at play on both sides. Even though there was a lot of trouble behind the scenes, The Godfather kept going and became a worldwide hit. Over time, Sinatra is said to have changed his mind about the matter, but he never directly admitted that he was the motivation behind Fontaine. Still, it's safe to say that he later didn't mind the movie's huge impact. But there were still more problems to solve, even with the mafia's help. What happened next could have completely changed the legacy of The Godfather. The real chaos of making the video had just started. Number 13. There were real mobsters on set. There were real mafia ties on the set of The Godfather, so it wasn't just a movie about them. Some people found the movie's picture of organized crime too close to home, especially the Italian-American Civil Rights League, which was led by the notorious mobster Joe Colombo. Colombo wasn't just working for civil rights. He also wanted to protect the image of Italian-Americans and stop The Godfather from spreading false ideas about the mafia. Coppola and the directors made a deal with the League so that the movie wouldn't be shut down. The League let the show go ahead as long as the word mafia was taken out of the script. But that wasn't the end of the mafia's power. Real mobsters were often on set during shooting to keep an eye on things. This gave the movie a special sense of realism. James Caan, who played Sonny, said that watching how the mobsters behaved in small ways helped him get better at his part. It felt very real having them there, and even though it wasn't talked about, it's clear that their real-life ties affected how some scenes turned out. There were ties between the mafia behind the scenes that made The Godfather feel even more like a real-life event than a movie. Number 12. Lenny Montana was a real mob enforcer. Luca Brasi is the bodyguard for the Corleone family. One of the most interesting things that happened on the set of The Godfather is how Lenny Montana was cast as him. Montana was more than just an actor. He used to work for the mafia as a mob executioner. As the tough, silent, and loyal guardian, he was perfect for the part because he was 6 feet 6 inches tall and had worked in the criminal underworld before. But Montana didn't feel as good about himself in front of the camera as he did when he was out on the streets. He forgot his lines so many times in his first scenes with Marlon Brando because he was so scared. This nervous energy was just what Coppola needed to make the scene where Luca Brasi talks to Don Vito Corleone feel alive. Coppola chose to welcome Montana's awkwardness instead of trying to hide it. Montana was seen reading from a sheet of paper, which made the scene even more intense and awkward, and added to Brasi's character as a nervous but loyal person. Montana's stress and real-life experience gave the scene a creepy depth that made it one of the most memorable and scary parts of The Godfather. "I'm honored and grateful that you have invited me to your daughter's wedding, on the day of her wedding," became a famous line. It all came from the actor's real-life stress. Number 11. James Caan's fight scene was real. One of the most intense and memorable parts of The Godfather is still the scene at the toll booth where James Caan's character, Sonny Corleone, is shot and attacked. The scene was deeply emotional and real, and it wasn't just good acting. It came from real pain. Caan was filmed in the middle of dozens of squibs, which are explosive devices meant to look like gunshots. The scene was even more real though, because of how intense the action was. The toll booth set was a mess, with real bullet holes popping off, making it feel like everyone was on the line. James Caan, who was known for giving his parts his all, got caught up in the chaos. During shooting, he got real injuries, like cuts and bruises from the explosions and the fast-paced dance moves in the scene. The pain he was in made his response to the gunshots, the fear in his eyes, and the crazy energy of the moment even stronger. In fact, Caan worked so hard on the scene that it became an important part of Sonny's personality, showing the unfiltered anger that led to his sad end. People saw a mix of skill, emotion, and the risk Caan was ready to take in real life to make one of the most famous fight scenes in movie history. Number 10. Marlon Brando's Oscar speech was boycotted. There was a lot of talk about Marlon Brando's Oscar win for The Godfather. Even though Brando is famous for his role as Don Vito Corleone, he made a strong political statement in his victory speech. Brando wouldn't take the Best Actor award at the 1973 Academy Awards. Instead, he asked campaigner Sachin Littlefeather to turn down the award for him. A Native American activist named Sachin Littlefeather said that Brando was protesting how Hollywood portrayed Native Americans in movies, especially how Native characters were often portrayed in degrading and stereotypical ways. Many people in Hollywood thought Brando's decision not to accept the Oscar was a big deal because it brought attention to social problems that were normally ignored. But some people didn't like the move. Some people in the crowd, like John Wayne, were very angry and even tried to talk to Littlefeather while she was speaking. Even though there was a reaction, Brando's choice changed the movie business for good. It made people more aware of the need for better representation and opened the